Hi, peeps. You're listening to She's My Cherry Pie, the baking podcast from the Cherry Bombe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jessie Sheehan. I'm a baker, recipe developer, and author of 4 baking books, including Salty, Cheesy, Herby, Crispy, Snackable Bakes. On each episode, I hang out with the sweetest bakers around and take a deep dive into their signature bakes. Today is our last episode of the year, and I'm so excited for our guest. It's Skye McAlpine. Skye is a British food writer, cookbook author, and stylist known for her beautiful, effortless recipes and for highlighting the culinary culture in Venice. Her family moved from London to the Italian city when she was just 6 years old, and she's called it home ever since. Skye's the author of several cookbooks, including A Table in Venice, A Table for Friends, A Table Full of Love, and her latest, The Christmas Companion, which we talk all about. She writes a monthly recipe column for the Sunday Times and has contributed to other publications, including Vogue, Vanity Fair, The Guardian, and Condé Nast Traveler. Skye has a tableware and homewares brand, Skye McAlpine Tavola, which is inspired by Italian craftsmanship and celebrates La Dolce Vita. She also writes a Substack, aptly named The Dolce Vita Diaries. Skye shares her journey with me from her move to Venice as a young girl to university in England to her life today, which she splits between Italy and the UK. Skye and I talk about her early Venetian baking and sweets eating memories, as well as the panettone she ate on Christmas Eve growing up, how she first began entertaining while in university using nothing but a toaster oven in her dorm room to host tea and crumpets for her friends, how she learned to cook by reading cookbooks, the tiramisu she made her husband soon after they first met, and how the blog she had while writing her classics PhD led to her first cookbook. Then she walks me through her chocolate and chestnut Yule log recipe from the new book. It's a delicious, utterly whimsical treat, and she has so many good tips and tricks for those a bit intimidated by making one. And her recipe and instructions for baking the log's decorative meringue mushrooms could not be easier. Skye was such a delight to interview, so stay tuned for our chat. And thank you for listening to our show. I'm wishing everyone the sweetest of holidays. You can find today's recipe at cherrybombe.substack.com. Today's episode is presented by California Prunes. I'm looking at a bunch of bananas on my counter right now, just waiting to be turned into my chocolate prune and creme fraiche banana bread. The prunes get deliciously soft and jammy as they bake. They're one of my favorite secret ingredients. They're also super good for you, which is a bonus. Did you know that prunes are packed with dietary fiber? Okay, yes, you probably did. But they also support bone health, which is extra important to me. And they're packed with vitamins and antioxidants. So much goodness. Whenever I am looking to add a little natural sweetness to something, from my morning smoothie to an oatmeal cookie, I know prunes will do just the trick. One of my favorite ways to use them is in my sticky toffee pudding snacking cake. Yes, I turned this beloved pudding into a snacking cake. And it's so good, peeps. I swap prunes in for the traditional dates, which adds a more intense fruitiness and aren't quite as sweet. The result is the perfect ratio of sweet, salty, and sticky, and it's so easy to assemble. Trust me, you'll want to make this dessert soon. If you're looking to add more prunes to your baking, know that they pair brilliantly with other deep, complex flavors, especially chocolate. Or chop them up to use as you would any other dried fruit in your granola or cookies. It's hard to go wrong. For more info and creative recipes, check out the California Prunes website at californiaprunes.org. That's californiaprunes.org. Today's episode is presented by Diamond of California Nuts, the century-old nut brand you know and love. As we're gearing up for holiday baking season, my favorite season, make sure you're stocked up on all the baking nuts you'll need, and with Diamond, you know you're getting guaranteed fresh quality. You can really taste the difference. Diamond has us covered with all the nuts, whole, chopped, sliced, and even in shell too, if you're ever in the mood to crack some walnuts. Hey, maybe you have a nutcracker. I'll go with the chopped walnuts, which I put in my crazy delicious chocolate marshmallow walnut fudge. The pecans are a must in my chocolate bourbon pecan pie, And I also love using them to make candied nuts for holiday gifting. That's when I want to be using the best ingredients I can find. So when you're at the grocery store, look for the nuts in the white bag with the red diamond logo in the baking aisle. That's your sign you're getting premium quality nuts that bakers have trusted for generations. Visit diamondnuts.com to find a store nearest you and to explore their fan-favorite recipes like walnut butter cookies. Yum! Happy baking! If you're looking for some excellent and unique holiday gifts, Cherry Bombe has great options for you. From now until the end of the year, you can get 20% off Jubilee tickets when you buy 2 or more. Jubilee is our annual conference happening on Saturday, April 25th in New York City, and it's a beautiful day filled with talks and panels, networking, and great food and drink. What else? There's back issues of Cherry Bombe magazine, a yearly subscription to the magazine, and a subscription to our Substack. There are fun benefits to being a paid Substack subscriber, like access to monthly virtual meetings featuring experts in the food, drink, and hospitality industries. These would all be great gifts for foodie friends, colleagues, loved ones, or for yourself. Head to cherrybombe.com to shop and learn more. Let's chat with today's guest. Skye! So excited to have you on She's My Cherry Pie and to talk chocolate and chestnut Yule log with you and so much more.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this. I'm such a fan of the show, so it's such a treat and such an honor to be here today.
Yay! So you moved to Venice from England when you were 6 years old with your parents, and although you guys intended to stay only 6 months, you actually never left. Can you please share an early Venetian, either sweet eating or maybe baked good eating memory?
Well, so many, but 2 quite sweet ones. And one is, I just remember, and this was actually predates when we moved to Venice, because before we moved to Venice, we used to go there on holiday. In Italy, one of the loveliest things about the country, I think, is how kind everyone is to children and how much everyone loves children, which is sort of so nice and so different from how things were in the UK in the 1980s. And I remember we would go on holiday to Venice and my parents would go shopping. Every shop we would go into, they would end up giving me sweets. Like you'd go to the lace shop, you go to the stationery shop, and they'd all had like different kinds of sweets, and they'd give me a couple of sweets. And I don't remember this, but my mother says it's so mortifying because when I came back to England, I'd walk into a shop and I would just like put my hand out, like, begging for a sweet, because I've always had a very sweet tooth. One shop in particular, it was this amazing old lace shop, and I remember she'd give you sugar cubes, which actually I just don't think anyone would do now.
Right,
but,
exactly.
So delicious.
I love that. And were there any early, besides putting your hand out when you went to shops with your mom in London, were there any early English baked good memories or sweets memories?
Well, when I was very little, before we moved to Venice, so my memory is a little patchy from that time, but I remember my mother used to do a lot more baking actually when I was really little. Before we moved to Italy, I think she did a lot more baking when we lived in England. Maybe that's also to do with, especially in, again, going back to the 80s, it was very hard to eat well in England. And we didn't have the culture that we have now of kind of amazing bakery, which is so prominent on the continent, especially in Italy, of kind of wonderful bakeries, etc. So kind of if you wanted something delicious and baked, it was best to bake it yourself. So she did a lot of baking then. And I remember she was really into proper old-fashioned British puddings, which have now kind of, you know, what they call like a spotted dick or a roly-poly pudding, or these kind of often steamed puddings, quite stodgy, very rich, but delicious and very unfashionable now, actually. It might be worth revisiting.
Bringing
whole
back.
Genre.
Bringing back. Although the names, I'm not sure how the names would go over.
Yeah, I like the spotted dick.
The spotted dick. We might have some problems here in the United States, at least.
Even the roly-poly pudding, I think, is kind of on the edge there.
It also seems like growing up in Venice, which is a city within a country of food lovers.
I think everyone loves food. It's just Italy that gets it right, that kind of recognizes that everyone loves food. I think, you know, sometimes in England we have this expression, which is a foodie, which is what you call someone who likes food. And I always think it's the most annoying expression in the world, because I just think everyone loves food. That's just a basic human instinct. It's not some grand title. to wear with pride. It's just a state of being, a universal state of being. And I think that's one of the things that's so lovely about the Italian attitude to food is its emphasis on universality. Like I quite often joke, but I think it is true that in England, when you have an awkward silence or you meet someone new or you're sort of struggling for conversation, you chat about the weather. It's kind of like, oh, it's cold today or it's raining again, meant to be nice tomorrow, etc. And in Italy, you just talk about food, what you had for lunch, what you're going to have for dinner. It's porcini season. They've been really good this year. They haven't been really good. They were expensive at the market. And this is kind of very cross-generational, very cross-class, and can be cross, nationality and cultural identity, because we, on an instinctive level, we all enjoy eating. So I think what's so lovely about Italy is they really celebrate that.
We'll be right back. Cake lovers, did you see the new issue of Cherry Bombe magazine? It's all about cake and features 3 incredible self-taught cake artists on the covers. Lucy Franck de Ferrière of From Lucy, Amy France, a.k.a. Young Kombucha 420, and Amy Yip of Yip Studio. All 3 discovered their passion for cake making and design out of necessity during the pandemic and transformed their hobbies into thriving careers. You'll love getting to know these women in our cover stories. What else is in this issue? A bounty of delicious cake recipes, profiles of even more incredible cake artists, stories of nonprofits using cakes for a good cause, an inspiring bake sale, and so much more. To snag the mag, head to cherrybombe.com or find a copy at your local bookstore. You can find us in some great places across the country, like Kitchen Arts and Letters in Manhattan, Books Are Magic in Brooklyn, Omnivore Books on Food in San Francisco, and Book Larder in Seattle. For a full list of retailers, visit cherrybombe.com. Now back to our guest. Since your new book is about Christmas and we're going to talk about it, can you tell us about your childhood Christmases that I think it sounds like more like your mom, but I'm sure your father played a role too. Just this combo of like the Venetian Christmas Eve and then the more English Christmas Day and the food that you guys ate.
Both my parents always loved Christmas and always made a big fuss of it, which I think I'm very grateful for because now I love Christmas. I think pretty much as a direct consequence. I'm completely obsessed with Christmas. And one of the great advantages of being from one place and growing up in another is that you kind of get to pick and choose your traditions and your customs and what you make part of your life in a way. So I feel very lucky that I get to do double Christmas, because in Italy, the big deal is on Christmas Eve and you have a big feast that night. We'll kind of usually do that kind of more in the Italian style and then go to midnight mass afterwards, which is always really magical and really nice. And then the next day, we kind of do things the English way, which is stockings first thing in the morning, and then what we call a proper Christmas lunch, which I don't know if this is similar in the States, but it would be traditionally like turkey with stuffing and roast potatoes and Brussels sprouts and red cabbage. Sort of, I'd say, are the core elements of it. Then you might add in as you like. And then that's when you would have your Christmas pudding or your Christmas cake.
For the Venetian Christmas Eve, very seafood driven, yes?
Yes. So it's all fish and seafood. Yeah. So we used to always spend Christmas Eve with Italian friends in Venice, and they would do a delicious dinner, and it would usually be several courses of seafood, maybe like scallops and then a kind of prawns and then this and then that, lots of dressed crab and what have you. And then often we would have a pasta, sometimes with truffle, like white truffle. So you might have like a tagliolini just with butter and shavings of white truffle as a special treat. After that, you'd have usually a whole baked fish. Yeah. So a baked sea bass or a turbot, some kind of like fancier special occasion fish.
I was going to say there would be panettone, and then I also read panadoro.
Pandoro. So panettone originally comes from Milan, although it has really become the sort of universal Italian Christmas food. But originally it's from the region of, Lombardia or from Milan. And Verona, which is a town quite near Venice, their answer to the panettone, which is almost as popular across the country as panettone, just not quite as popular. It's like the cousin of the panettone, is something called pandoro, which is a very similar kind of dough. It's a little bit drier, and then it doesn't have the raisins and the candied peel. It's plain. And then it's sort of shaped, it's a strange shape. It's a bit like a star, a cross between a star and a pyramid. and you douse it in icing sugar, the whole thing in icing sugar. And it's sort of, the dough is vanilla scented, I would say. So it's kind of got this lovely vanilla-y, or a traditional one has a lovely vanilla-y flavor to it. And one thing that quite often people do that's quite cute is you cut across its body in 3 or 4 places. And then you kind of twist the pieces, if that makes sense. So then you end up with almost like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Oh. And you can layer that with a cream or a custard, or just leave it just plain like that and just have it be like a Christmas tree.
Yeah. So you left home at 18 to go to university, to go to Oxford. I thought it was so interesting to learn that neither of your parents went to college, despite your father being this, prominent politician and advisor to Margaret Thatcher and all of the things. It's just, we can't ever tell our children any of this because we like to tell them, like, oh, you must go to university.
My great act of rebellion was to go to university.
And you studied classics, mythology, ancient Greece and Rome. And I loved learning this. Your PhD was about 17. And you joke, at least when I was sort of researching and learning about it, you always joke like, oh gosh, I don't even want to tell people what I studied. It's like a conversation killer, but
it is such a conversation killer.
But you studied
do it now and watch the conversation die.
Well, I love this piece of it. So it was 17th and 18th century translation of Ovid's Art of Love. And I know that one Christmas, I think Margaret Thatcher gave you a copy of some poetry. And was that because of what you were studying, or did it inspire your studies?
So that would have been when I was sort of maybe 18, 17, 18, something like that. It was a very thoughtful gift because it was obviously something I think she picked up on my interest, but I wasn't formally studying.
We can't say that it was all due to Margaret Thatcher.
Probably not, but I'm sure she played a part.
So while you were at university is where you discovered that you loved to cook and to entertain. I loved learning this. In the first 2 years of school, you had a toaster in your room. That was it. So you were hosting tea and crumpets. I want to know.
Great combination, by the way.
Oh my gosh.
But very good.
Tell me about the crumpets. Like, were you literally making?
No, so I didn't have it. So I was buying the crumpets and I was warming them in the toaster, which you probably wouldn't say qualifies as cooking, but kind of in college where no one cooks anything was basically the equivalent of studying at the Cordon Bleu.
Well, also, I just love that was sort of the beginning of you kind of hosting and having, even if it was...
That was, I think, what I took away from it was the joy of encourage bringing people over and offering them food and bringing them together in a setting that feels kind of cozy and warm and welcoming and relaxing. Because I mean, I love going to restaurants. We all love going to restaurants, but there is a very different mood and feel, I think, to eating in someone's home and eating even with close friends. There's one thing to go out to a restaurant and that's a certain mood and vibe and that's great. But actually there's another very magical mood and vibe, which is eating in someone's home. And somehow I think you relax in a home setting in a way that, however fabulous the restaurant, I just don't think you ever quite do in the same way.
I totally agree. In your third year of school, you actually had a kitchen, and that's when
it was very exciting. I mean, let's call it a kitchen. In retrospect, I'm not sure. Definitely, I doubt it passed many health and safety.
An unsafe kitchen.
An unsafe kitchen.
But that's really when you fell in love with cookbooks, and the tea and crumpets turned into actual sort of dinner parties. Tell us about because I know you've said that you sort of taught yourself to cook from cookbooks or cookery books. Do you remember which ones?
I mean, I had quite a few favorites. I'd say real favorites. I had Skye Gingel's How I Cook was one of my favorite books that really inspired me and I absolutely loved. And I had another book by someone called Joanna Weinberg, a lesser known book, and it was called How to Feed Your Friends with Relish. And actually, it was a beautiful, beautiful book. It so captured the spirit of what I wanted to do. And it's a really cute book. It's a smaller format and very few photos. It's mostly kind of just little illustrations, but kind of she just talked in such a sort of charming and warm and inspiring way about the joy of having friends over and gave very practical advice. And her recipes were all like delicious things that you wanted to eat and that were relatively easy. But in fact, very easy to replicate.
You actually met your husband at university. Tell us about, I think maybe he might have won your culinary heart with some crepes and maybe you made him a tiramisu?
Yes. So, when we first met was what's called Freshers Week. I don't know if you guys have Freshers Week in the States, but it's sort of this carnage of a week where all the newbies start in college and then kind of get thrown together in a series of social settings. And that's a lot of debauchery and drinking and quite overwhelming if you're at all kind of shy, like I was, and coming from sheltered Venice. But one of the people that I met was my husband. Well, he wasn't my husband then, but my now husband. So we sort of met, and then he said that he was hosting a party in his accommodation, like in the building that he was at. And so I thought, and I said I'd go. And I thought, oh gosh, I mustn't turn up empty-handed. So I actually made a tiramisu, and I made it I didn't have any cooking. I had my toaster, but I didn't really have anything else. But there was a sink in my bedroom, and I used that sink, and I kind of whisked the eggs over the sink, and I made the tiramisu, and I turned up at the party with this massive tray of tiramisu, and literally everyone else came with beer. And I was the kind of muggins with the tiramisu. But I think it left a lasting impression one way or another. And then not long after that, we started dating. And in the early days, still in that kitchen, because he did have access to a kitchen, he used to make pancakes for breakfast on Sundays, which I love. I love pancakes, but the sort of English pancakes, which are, well, I mean, I would have loved the American pancakes as well. I'm very grateful for any kind of pancakes, but the sort of thin, as you say, correct.
Yeah. So you were cooking and hosting through pursuing your master's and your PhD work. And then I think during your PhD studies, you took a food writing class at Prue Leith's, and Prue was a guest on the podcast. So hi, Prue, if you're listening. Anyway, what was interesting about that experience for you, among, I'm sure, many different things, is that you sort of realized that, food writers and other people in this industry, not everybody went to culinary school. There are 100%. More paths to getting to maybe where I'd want to be than I thought.
100%. Because I mean, I kind of wish I'd known that sooner, because I think my life, well, not that I regret in any way, and the path has taken me where I want to be. But I definitely, for a long time, didn't think it was possible for me to do what I do now. And what was so lovely about that course was seeing that, there's not just one way to write about food, and there's not just one way to kind of be in a position to write about food.
Yeah.
So that was very inspiring for me and very helpful.
Yeah, those barriers to entry sometimes are imagined. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And once you kind of can understand that, you feel either less afraid or in a positive way, braver about making a decision 100%. That at first you thought, I can't do that.
And, those sort of words, fake it till you make it, on one hand, of course, wrong. But in some way, it's sometimes just believing that something is possible, and then you will actually find a way.
It was sort of that class that you took at Prue's school that inspired you to start a blog. And then the blog actually led to your first book, A Table in Venice. Also, I love this, and I want you to tell us about it. But I love it also because I do think there are these things we do in life, and we have no idea how they're actually a staircase somewhere or a path somewhere. Yeah. I just love how that all worked.
It really worked out. I started a blog. I was determined. I think also I'm still quite determined, but I was especially determined in those days. I knew all I wanted to do was publish a cookbook. That's all I could see. That was the pinnacle. That was as far as I kind of got. And I thought, like, if I could do that, then I'd done what I really, really wanted to do. So I did. I just started writing a blog, and it was kind of terrible. And that was fine. That was part of the process. But over time, I kind of gained in confidence. And I do think sometimes, especially in these creative professions, it's just about doing something. And if there isn't someone who's going to pay you to do it, or there isn't someone who's, going to commission you to do it or whatever, I just think putting things out there helps generate opportunities. And as you say, it might not be directly from that first thing that you do, but everything is sort of part of a journey. And if nothing else, you're doing something that you absolutely love in the meantime. And also you're getting better at it, because practice if it doesn't make perfect, it definitely makes for better. The more you can kind of work on doing what you want to do, the better you'll get at it. And in the meantime, there's a lot of satisfaction and joy to be drawn from just the actual process of writing or whatever it is that you want to be doing. So I kind of was just like stabs in the dark, just kind of going for it. And somehow or another, by the time sort of did that for about 2 years. And then when I was wrapping up my PhD, I'd had a cookbook commissioned, which was great. And so it kind of felt like I had a raft to leap on to. I had something that I could kind of hold on to. I was like, this is a tangible thing. Maybe this could be a thing. And so I did that. And then that's led to further books and my column and other bits and bobs.
The first 3 books that you've written are all, I think of them as like the table series.
The table books.
Like Table in Venice, Table for Friend, Table Full of Love. I even wondered if there was any talk of it being called the Christmas table.
Oh, there definitely was. There definitely was. My publisher was very, very keen on the festive table or the table at Christmas or whatever. And I just felt strongly that this book is different. It's a continuation. The spirit is similar. The style in many ways is different. It's similar. But the character of the book just felt like so standalone that I just felt like the title needed to reflect that as well. We had a to and fro over it, and then we settled on the Christmas Companion.
I love that. The Christmas Companion, simple recipes and creative ideas for a magical festive season. I love that your editor, when she first suggested the idea to you, had suggested it be a small book.
Yes, she did.
And it's
and I thought that sounds great.
Yeah, exactly.
And I started writing it, and it grew and it grew and it grew. And we actually ended up cutting the manuscript down by about 20% because it was just like a hell of a doorstopper. I mean, it was sort of overwhelming.
Can you describe?
It turns out there's a lot to say about Christmas.
I know, right? And I also love, it also includes Thanksgiving. So,
yes.
Even though, yes, it's very Christmas focused, there are also so many tips and so many different tools that people can use and embrace for entertaining.
100%. I do think Christmas is Christmas. And as I said, it's its own sort of standalone holiday and its own moment in the calendar year. And we definitely go all out in a way that we don't throughout the rest of the year. But the spirit of Christmas is one that's alive throughout the year. Every time you host a supper party or have friends over for Sunday lunch or whatever it is, that's essentially the spirit of Christmas, which is bring people that you love to have a special meal. So I think there's a lot from the book, particularly if you like hosting. There's a lot that's applicable from this book that might feel acutely relevant over the holidays, but actually is useful throughout the year.
Before we jump into the recipe from your book for the Yule log, can you tell us about your tableware company, Tavola?
Yes, well, I launched almost 5 years ago now. That kind of came about. I worked on a tableware collaboration with Anthropology just before that. And that was really, really fun. And I really enjoyed it. And it kind of gave me the confidence and kind of inspired me to take it a step further. And now I have my own, we're a small business. Almost everything is made in Italy.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of hand-painted ceramics. And a lot of the designs are kind of inspired by vintage pieces that I've collected. But the idea is, I think the tableware is, the table is an important part of eating, hence all the table books, hence my general obsession with tables. But maybe beautiful is too strong a word, but having a setting that sort of sets the tone, which is one of kind of warmth and sense of occasion. I think, to eat together is a big thing and it's a privilege and a special moment, and it's nice to sort of celebrate that. So I think the table for me is the foundation in a way for the recipes and for the cooking. And I also think for those who like eating, which is all of us, but perhaps don't love cooking or don't feel that they have the time to cook or lack the confidence, then a good stepping stone is kind of getting comfortable with setting your table really beautifully. And, it doesn't have to be over the top, but, the plates that you love and the glass that you love and a nice, what my mother would call a proper napkin and so on and so forth. And then thinking, well, actually, all I need to do now is just put some nice mozzarella and some nice tomatoes on one dish. And that's lovely. I could toss a salad. Yes, I feel confident I can do that. Maybe I buy a cake from the bakery and I serve it on this nice cake stand. And it kind of, I think, gets you comfortable with this idea of hosting. Yeah. And then baby steps from there, you build up. And then one time you think, do you know what, I'm going to be a bit more adventurous and I'm going to try and bake the cake myself or whatever it is. But everything I do, I feel like my big thing that drives me in what I do and that I always keen to share is this idea of making it easier in some way or another, encouraging people to have their friends over and have a nice meal together, because I just think that's such a source of joy in life. So any way that I can kind of support and encourage and help with that, I'm very keen to.
So now I want to talk about the chocolate and chestnut Yule log. I love the sort of introduction to this recipe in the book. You sort of give us some tips and some words of support. And you tell us a Yule log or a bûche de Noël, it takes time, patience. But you tell us you make it in stages. None of them are tricky or lengthy. Encourage us. If we want to purchase meringue mushrooms, we can do that. We don't need to make them. Although I have to say the recipe is very easy and we're going to go through it.
It genuinely is easy.
Yeah.
I think it's quite a nice one if you want to sort of move into what feels like more ambitious baking. I think this is quite a good one because like you say, it's an easy recipe. And then I think what you have at the end, you're going to be like, wow, I made that.
And you say, the recipe might seem laborious, but it's worth it because we're going to have this, pillowy, light, chocolatey, not overly sweet, whipped cream, sugared chestnut glossed in a fudgy bittersweet ganache cake. And just the magic of, which is so true, of a cake that looks like, you call it an enchanted woodland log.
What is not to love?
It's so good. It's so good. So first things first, we're going to make the cake. It's essentially like a chiffon cake, which means rather than like an angel food cake, which is just egg whites, we're going to have yolks and some oil. And we like a chiffon cake for this job because it's light, moist, and flexible. So we'll heat the oven to 350. We'll grease a jelly roll pan, which is about 50.5 by 10.5 inches. We're going to grease the pan with vegetable oil. Are we brushing it on? Do you put it on like a paper towel?
I often put it on paper towel and then just rub it in. But I don't know why I do that. I just do that.
We could also use softened butter or cooking spray, or do you just like to use the oil because the oil is what's called for in the recipe? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we'll line the bottom with paper. But we don't need to grease the paper, right?
No. Okay. No.
Then we're going to sift together some all-purpose flour, some cocoa powder, baking powder, fine sea salt. So we're going to sift together these ingredients in a mixing bowl, just because I know you care about bowls, and we're always curious too. Do you love a ceramic bowl, a glass bowl, a metal bowl?
So I love my KitchenAid. That comes with the regular aluminium KitchenAid bowl. Yep. Although on my Christmas wish list this year is the copper.
So nice.
Yeah.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I'm hoping Father Christmas will like it.
I feel like he's going to. I'm just getting
I really
feeling.
hope so. Manifesting and
And I wondered why you sift rather than whisk. Is that just so that it's sort of a bit lighter?
It's a bit lighter in area, I think. Yep. Just because you want to keep the cake as you say,
as light as possible. In a second large mixing bowl, we're going to whisk some egg whites until frothy. Are we using our stand mixer? Or are we using a hand mixer at this point?
We use the stand mixer. Yeah, I've now got two KitchenAids. I have a big and a smaller one. And so I'm just really lazy and I just always use that.
I totally understand. And also, if you're bringing whites to stiff glossy peaks, which we're about to, that's a lot of work. You could definitely, if your mentality is, do you know what, I'm going to get a workout in before this cake so that I can really enjoy the cake. Then 100% do by hand. But in the absence of that, I would just say definitely. And the KitchenAid, I got to say, is amazing because it does its thing and you can potter around the kitchen. 100%.
Whatever else you want. And it's a brilliant piece of kit.
So we'll whisk our egg whites until frothy. Then we'll add some superfine sugar. And if we can't find, I feel like superfine is sort of the standard for you in England, yes?
Yes. So we call it caster sugar
exactly.
in the UK. Which is what I always use. Yep. I'm not really sure what that translates to.
We have a superfine sugar, actually. So it's labeled correctly for like an American baker. But I also know that sometimes we can take granulated sugar and just grind it up in like a spice grinder. And then we get...
And you basically get caster sugar from that.
Yep. So we'll add some superfine sugar, a spoonful at a time, until stiff, glossy peaks form. And are you, at this point, is your mixer on pretty high when you're...
I always just max it out.
Yep.
But I don't know if that's the right thing to do. I just feel like it's good.
And so we do that, bring our whites to stiff, glossy peaks. And then in a third mixing bowl, we'll whisk our egg yolks, some more superfine sugar, a little bit of oil, vanilla, and we'll whisk that together until pale and fluffy and voluminous.
I love that, how egg yolks just kind of completely
change. They transform.
Do you know what feels more magical than the egg whites?
It
does.
The
egg whites are sort of used to it, but the egg yolks, it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's turned into a custard.
I agree. I agree. Then we will fold our whites into our fluffy yolks. Then we'll fold our sifted dry ingredients 1/3 at a time. At this point, we're sort of folding by hand with a flexible spatula.
Definitely, yeah. And trying to keep as much of the air in there as possible, even though it's quite tempting to sort of smush out the lumps, don't do that. Just keep folding lightly and hold the face.
And then we'll spread the batter evenly into our prepared pan. We'll gently bang it on the countertop a couple of times to pop any air bubbles.
That's quite important, that step.
Because
I think it's an easy one to sort of skip over.
Yeah.
But the air bubbles will, I mean, it's not the end of the world because you're going to cover the whole thing in ganache.
Yeah.
Anyway. But the air bubbles sort of make it less stable when it comes out.
And then you say, and this is also, we're banging to level it out. Do we also spread it with an offset spatula, or you don't need to, sort of the banging?
I think you don't need to. If you just sort of drop it, I literally just kind of drop it from a low height onto the set a couple of times. And that does kind of typically. But I mean, if for some reason you see a massive kind of dip or something, then you might want to nudge it along. But I don't think you'll need to.
So we're going to bake for a short period of time, just 15 minutes. Do you like to rotate at the halfway point, to avoid hot spots in your oven?
I don't bother typically. And that probably is one of those ones about knowing your kitchen. Like if you have a more temperamental oven and it does that, then I definitely
then you should rotate.
Do the rotation thing.
So we'll bake for 15 minutes until the sponge springs back lightly when we press on it with our finger. And while the sponge is still warm, and I was going to ask you, is this still warm like we just took it out, or do you like to let it sit for about 5 minutes?
I mean, I wouldn't give it very long because it will cool down very quickly.
Yeah.
Because it's
so thin.
So thin.
Yep.
And a wide surface area.
Yep.
So I probably, if you can bear to touch it, I would pretty much
do it right away.
Straight away and then roll it up.
While the sponge is still warm, we're going to lift it out of the pan. How are we lifting? Are our parchment handles a little bit?
Parchment, I just sort of would probably put like a little knife or something under the parchment to lift up a corner and then
lift it up. Yep.
If you were handy with the parchment, maybe allow a little bit extra
to come out on the short sides, and then you can lift it up.
Pull it up that way.
Perfect. And then starting with the shorter side of the cake, we're going to gently and slowly roll the cake up, and we're using sort of the parchment to assist us. And the parchment literally gets rolled up with the cake.
It feels wrong.
It feels wrong, very weird. Yeah. I thought this was interesting too, because sometimes people do this with a dish towel, and sometimes there's a lot of, if it's a vanilla cake, there's a lot of confectioner sugar.
And I kind of don't love doing that because it just makes the kitchen really messy.
I know, I hate that. Yeah.
But it makes the kitchen really messy. It's all over my clothes and it just feels like a fat.
Yeah.
And I think for this one, if you're doing what we call a Swiss roll, where it's sort of more exposed, or a traditional roulade, then you might want to be a bit more delicate and fussy over it. But this, you're going to cover the whole thing in ganache anyway. So if it splits a little bit or whatever, it's
fine. Yeah. No, it's so nice to not have to be so fussy about the rolling.
Yeah, I think so, because otherwise it is a bit stressful.
Well, particularly
I find a Swiss roll a bit stressful.
I cannot agree with you more. And also, to your point, if you're making like a chocolate roulade or a chocolate Swiss roll or even a chocolate Yule log, and it's a different kind of recipe, you might have a dish towel that you then covering in cocoa powder, and then you're putting the cake,
and you got to wash
and then
it,
you're covered in cocoa powder, I'm just agreeing wholeheartedly. So we're going to roll up. Paper's rolled up in the cake, and we'll let that cool completely. Just leave it rolled up, sitting on the counter. We don't put it in the fridge at this stage.
No, because I think also the sudden jump in temperature wouldn't be very kind for it.
And it could crack if it got too cold, I bet.
Just let it cool to room temperature.
Yeah. So now we'll make the filling. So we'll whip some heavy cream and some confectioner sugar in a large mixing bowl until soft peaks form. We don't want to over whisk. And then we're going to fold in some chestnut puree. Can you tell me about chestnut puree? Like, should I picture like almost chestnut that are brown, for lack of a better description? Ground, like what makes it a paste?
So chestnut puree is, I buy this French brand called Clément Faugier. You can get it easily here in the UK, and it comes in these really pretty tins with all drawings of chestnuts on them. And that is already sweetened. But it's basically, to make your own, and I have done that, you would buy vacuum packed chestnuts. Or this is how I would do it anyway.
Yeah.
And then you blitz them, probably in a food processor. I think I use a handheld thingy, but a food processor is probably better, until you get something that resembles a cream. But then you need to sweeten it. So then you just keep adding icing sugar until it tastes genuine. Because the kind that you get from a tin, already sweetened Clément Faugier kind, it almost tastes like fudge. I mean, it's insanely yummy.
And is it almost
very, very sweet?
Almost like spreadable?
It's spreadable. You could have it on toast if you want. I guess if you're, it's the same sort of chestnut puree as you'd use for a Mont Blanc, I guess.
Yeah, yum. So we'll fold in some chestnut puree, and then gently and slowly we will unroll a room temperature sponge cake. And does it cool down relatively quickly?
Yeah, pretty quickly. I mean, you can tell if it's cool by just touching it.
Yeah.
I would give it more time rather than less, because you don't want to add the cream
if it's
to
still
it,
warm,
or even particularly chestnut puree whilst it's warm, because it will melt and go gross.
And we'll spread the chestnut cream all over the cake, leaving just about a 3/4 inch border around the edges. Then we'll gently roll the sponge back up, this time without the paper.
No paper.
That would be so sad.
If you got the paper in this time, that is wrong.
Yeah, that would be so sad. And I love this. You say, if the sponge splits a little as you roll it, don't worry. You're really not going to notice once it's covered in ganache.
No prizes for the unsplit sponge in this instance.
No. Then we'll carefully lift the cake after we've rolled it and place it on a cutting board or a serving dish. And you say,
this is key, because once you ice it, there's no turning back. You're not going to be able to move it.
Yeah.
So think where you want to create your scene, and particularly if you want to kind of go really over the top with the little meringue mushrooms or whatever, then you probably want a nice, I think border's quite nice actually, because you have a flat surface to work on, and you might want to travel a little bit further than the actual surface.
When you try to lift it, I've used, we call them fish spatulas, almost like a big metal spatula that sort of has, I want to say time.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I actually don't have one, but I've seen them.
What do you use to lift?
I think I use like my kind of cake slice.
Yeah,
I just shuffle it over.
Yep.
But I basically just use whatever implement feels like it's going to be. I think, like you say, get scoop under.
Yeah.
And then you can use your, I mean, it's pretty solid and compact at this point. I mean, I wouldn't hold it just on one side or anything, but
I think you could also maybe use, like a very large offset spatula that you might frost a cake with, like if you had two of those.
And also, you don't, we say lift, but I mean, if you've got your board here and it's there, I'd bring, the board close to it, and you could do quite a sort of shuffle. You don't sort of have to kind of do a whole.
Totally. Cover it with plastic wrap, set it in the fridge to chill. So another thing for people to remember, whatever you're placing it on, make sure it'll fit in your refrigerator.
100%. Yes.
I've been there, done that. Yeah. I've been like, no.
Otherwise, you're just going to have to move it again.
Exactly. Then we're going to set it in the fridge to chill for at least 30 minutes, but it could go up to 2 days, which is another great reminder about planning and figuring out how everything is going to come together.
Like you met your fill at this point of the whole baking palaver. That's great, because you can take 2 days off and revisit.
So now we'll make the ganache topping. We'll gently warm some heavy cream in a small saucepan over medium heat. Bring to just before the boil, so where we'll see those like teeny tiny bubbles at the edges of the pan. We'll take the pan off the heat, add some chopped bittersweet chocolate. Is there a favorite brand that we might share?
I'd say the best kind you can afford.
Makes sense.
Honestly, I think it's somewhere where money is well spent.
Yes, because of that flavor. The flavor will really come out. So we'll add the chocolate to the warm cream and stir until completely melted. Then we'll set the ganache in the fridge for 30 to 60 minutes until it thickens. I love this descriptor, until the consistency of thick honey. Do we do any kind of stirring or checking in on it so it doesn't, how sometimes ganache gets cold around the edges? But
I mean, again, it probably depends a little on your fridge. Yeah. If your fridge is on the colder, some people have their fridges are kind of cold, like you put something in there and it almost freezes.
Yep.
I would probably be a little bit more acutely aware. I wouldn't bend over backwards, but if you're pottering in the kitchen anyway, every now and then, just give it a stir. Yep. Also, just out of curiosity to see what point it's got to, if it's a bit quicker or a bit slower.
Now we're going to make the mushrooms. We're going to heat the oven to 275 degrees. We'll line a baking sheet with parchment paper in a spotlessly clean bowl. We're going to whisk the egg white. And this is just one egg white, which I also love, like a tiny amount.
A tiny amount. I know. It is actually quite annoying to do with your KitchenAid. So maybe this is when you want to do
but with your hand.
Have a hand up. Otherwise, I just lift the bowl up.
Yeah,
so not a practical way of doing it. And then one trick that I have, I mean, it's not my trick, but I think it's quite useful. If you are worried, especially with meringue, if you are worried about the bowl not being 100% spotlessly clean, I just rub it with a lemon. Sometimes I do it anyway. Just rub it down with half a lemon.
And then for sure.
Because that kills off the grease.
Yep.
Because it probably doesn't matter so much for this one because it's only one egg white, but I've definitely had occasions where I've, tried to make meringue with, 6 or 12 egg whites.
And they just won't.
And it just won't.
Yeah, so frustrating.
And it feels like such a waste.
So we'll whisk the egg white, maybe by hand, with a little cream of tartar until frothy. Remind us why the cream of tartar. That's going to...
You could skip it if you don't have it. It's not the end of the world. It just gives you a glossier meringue, and I find it stabilize it a little bit. I just think I find my meringue when I put the cream of tartar in, it's more consistently good, if that makes sense. Yep. But again, if that's the only thing that's missing, I wouldn't have it stop you making the meringues.
Then we'll add some superfine sugar, half spoonful at a time, whisking constantly until we have stiff, glossy peaks. We're going to spoon the meringue into a piping bag with a round tip, about 1/8 of an inch in diameter.
If you don't have that tip, if you get the plastic disposable bags, you could just cut the end.
Perfect. We sometimes just say, like, those zippered plastic bags, like a Ziploc.
Yes. You could also use that.
One of those,
use the corner of that 100% and then cut it.
Yeah.
So again, don't feel like you need to go out and buy all this kit.
Right. So we're going to pipe blobs, technical term blob, of various sizes, ranging from like a nickel to a quarter. I love all of the this is clearly the...
It was so fascinating because I've only really properly paid attention to the English version. And I'm like, oh, a nickel.
I know. That's what I was thinking when I was reading. I was like, oh, I know what a nickel is. I know what a quarter is. With the piping bag held directly above the area where you're piping, and then you're pulling up on the bag quickly to make little pointed tops. And these will be our mushroom tops. So is the idea that our little mushrooms will have sort of a little tiny pointy hat?
Yeah, it's like, I think it makes them, because I did it as well, where I did it as sort of circles, like pennies, I guess. But it doesn't look as good. Whereas I think when you sort of pull up a bit, then you get, that sort of the mushroom in Fantasia, which is what I as kind of like the platonic ideal of a mushroom. It kind of has, it's not a pointy hat, and this won't be pointy because you're not going to be able to get a point. Yep. It's not flat. It's not a disc.
I love that. I love that. And then
you can also just wet your finger and use your finger to shape it a little bit if you want to on the top. If you want something that's like flatter, you can just press it down.
Then we'll lightly dust those tops with cocoa powder. And next, we're going to pipe the stems of the mushrooms by, again, pulling up gently on the piping bag as we apply even pressure. We're basically trying to create little towers, stems on which we can balance those mushroom tops. Yes, and we're going to pipe them to different heights just so that
you have different height. It's quite nice if you can. Yeah. I probably will anyway, because unless you're an incredibly precise baker, which I certainly am not, it would be very hard to get exactly the same height anyway. So I think it's quite nice in a way to make a little virtue of that by having them be different.
And we're piping them so that it's almost as if they're standing up on the sheet tray. Yes. We're not like piping lines.
No, exactly. You're piping it to be effectively like a little tower.
Yeah. Then we'll bake for 1 hour. We'll turn our oven off. And we'll leave in the oven to cool for the second hour.
Do not open the oven
for that second.
It doesn't really matter for these ones. But for meringues, generally, you do the sort of baking for an hour and then you switch off the oven and you leave them in for at least another hour. And then just to have that leap of faith of not opening the oven in between. And these, it won't matter so much because they're little and they're more decorative. It's not, but it's good.
Do you ever do that thing? I feel like sometimes people will put the handle of a wooden spoon or something in the oven to keep it ajar for that second hour.
I know people do that, but I just leave it in the oven to cool. But then again, I'm not sure if that's to do with my oven.
Yep.
But I find that works really. I must say, I don't want to jinx things, but touching wood, that gives me pretty consistently great.
Yeah. And do you do the same thing if you're making like a pavlova where you want the center to be like chewy and marshmallowy?
So with these guys, because they're so little, you won't get an especially chewy center. But if you use that exact same recipe, but instead of shaping it as mushrooms, you just sort of did it all, like you say, as a nest for a pavlova, that would give you the kind of nice chewy meringue.
Yeah. Now we're going to assemble our mushrooms. So we'll create a makeshift double boiler. We'll bring a saucepan of water to boil, melt some bittersweet chocolate in a heat-proof bowl over this simmering water.
But also, if you have a microwave, you could just microwave your chocolate to melt. It's just that's less of a science and more of a just like go 10 seconds at a time until you get to the right place.
I'm very microwave forward. I will be melting my chocolate in the microwave, but you could also do it in this double boiler. And then we'll dab a little bit of the melted chocolate on the center base of each mushroom top and then carefully stick the stem to it.
And that bit is the bit that's a little bit fiddly. Yeah. And just have the patience and stick with it. I find I usually end up propping the mushrooms up against tins or bits, just to hold it together. Or if you have the patience of just holding it, I don't understand why, but some it feels like they stick together really easily, and some they don't.
Less so.
Less so. But just keep, especially if you're doing it in the microwave, just keep remelting your chocolate.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Kind of keep.
And
you don't actually need a huge number either.
Is the idea that we would place the stem onto our base and then sort of hold it together for a few seconds or for a minute until it sort of adheres, and then we can let it gently just sit by the counter or leaning against the can?
Exactly. Leaning against the tin or leaning against something to sort of help it sort of stay together.
The chocolate hardens and sets usually about 30 to 60 minutes to be completely set, and you say we can put them in the refrigerator.
The fridge. Yeah, if you want to speed that process up, 100%, just pop them straight in the fridge.
Yeah.
Especially if you're making this somewhere warm, like it's cold here right now, so it's less. But if you're somewhere warm.
Yeah.
And this is actually quite a nice pudding to eat for Christmas. Yeah. Because it's not actually hot and chocolatey, and maybe it's not light, but it's in the sort of light pudding family.
Yes.
So then you could fridge or presumably even freezer if you need to, just very quickly for sort of 10 minutes or something.
Now we're going to assemble the cake. We'll take the cake from the fridge.
This is the fun bit.
I know. I always love this about bûche de Noël, which is so easy, but it's magic when it happens. But you just diagonally slice. Like 4 inches
and there's that
off.
moment where you just think, oh God, this is wrong. But it's the right thing to do, because otherwise you have a sort of a log that looks quite artificial, but you need
the branch. I love that.
And you create that. And then you can really play around. The log can be whatever you want it to be. You can keep cutting off little slivers and popping them along the actual log as much as you like. It could be, it could be a twig. It could have a sort of 2 ends, like a V if you wanted.
No, I just loved the first time I ever did that. I was like, oh my gosh, it looks like a branch. I couldn't believe it. But you basically will diagonally slice about 4 inches from one end and place that angled piece against the side of the roll to make a little branch. We'll slowly spoon the ganache, which is now sort of this consistency of thick honey, over the cake, spreading it evenly, covering the whole thing, including the ends.
And this bit can be a bit messy, and there's not you can do. And you just have lots of kitchen towel on hand and kind of scoop up and wipe up around the base if you need to, and know that icing sugar will cover a multitude of sins.
Yes. So we can use like a damp paper towel, let's say, to clean away the messy chocolate, or a dish towel from the board or the serving dish. Then we'll set it back in the fridge for about 30 minutes, so just so the ganache can set, harden a little. The cake can stay this way now for 3 days. Like, I love that you give us all the stages where we could stop and do something else.
Yeah, move on.
Yep.
Do something else.
So now we'll decorate the cake. We'll use a toothpick, but I wondered, do you ever use a fork?
You could use a fork, 100%, like toothpick, fork, whatever, even a knife, whatever you want. But you're basically just tracing ridges, because at this point it looks quite blobby, I would say. And you want to create a little bit of texture that in some way replicates bark, even if it's not an accurate replication, at least the kind of cartoon-like replica.
So we'll create these textured lines like tree bark all over the cake. Then we'll gently prop our little meringue mushrooms against the cake. We'll add a few sprigs of red currants, maybe some rosemary here and there. And then before serving, we'll dust with a little confectioner's sugar.
Icing sugar is kind of a magical moment, because you're like, that bit really brings it, I think, to life.
Oh my gosh.
That's the wow moment.
Do you try to do the confectioner's sugar right before serving, or does it not matter?
I think it doesn't matter too much, but I always think with icing sugar, the closer to serving you do it, the happier it is. Better. But I think it doesn't matter too much with this one, because it'll be fine. Also, you can always do it and then have a little bit of icing sugar help to one side.
To do it again.
To just do another quick dust.
Yeah.
If it gets blown away or absorbed or something.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Skye. And I just want to say that you are my cherry pie.
Oh, this has been so fun.
That's it for today's show. Thank you to California Prunes and Diamond of California Nuts for supporting our show. You can find today's recipe at cherrybomb.substack.com. Don't forget to follow She's My Cherry Pie on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And tell your pals about us. She's My Cherry Pie is a production of the Cherry Bombe Podcast Network. Our producers are Carrie Diamond, Catherine Baker, and Jenna Sadu. Thank you so much for listening to She's My Cherry Pie, and happy baking!